This episode is brought to you by Keeps.com. You're listening to the Cantina Cast, your home for thought-provoking Star Wars talk. Join Albert and Jonesy in breaking down the latest news, trailers, movies, and of course, your favorite characters from a galaxy far, far away.
Hello, Cantina Cast listeners, and welcome to episode 236, the solo listener feedback show. It's been a standing tradition for us to do a show like this right after a major movie launch, and honestly, they're a lot of fun to do, so we're excited about it. My name is Albert Padilla, and joining me tonight, fresh off the boat from a minor detail on Felucia, is none other than our very own Jonesy. Jonesy, how you doing, Chewbacca?
Yeah, that caught me way off guard. Albert loves to do this stuff, and it's fun. But it's like, okay, what are you throwing at me this time? But hey,
yeah, and how do I respond to it?
Exactly. I don't know what to do with that. I don't think on my feet very well. But hey, it's great. I'm happy to be here. It's a great day. Great day.
Yeah. Well, let's jump into it. We've got news as usual, and then we're going to get to a lot of questions. And not to steal the thunder, but man, we were talking about this before we came on the air. There's a lot of good questions in here. So hopefully we do them right and do them justice.
Absolutely.
So, all right. So let's talk about, we've got episode 9 news, and it's pretty minor. Don't get too excited, but, it looks like they've changed the working title, from, what was it? Black Diamond originally. Is that right?
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah. So Black Diamond, and now it's Trixie. And I think I posted this on social media, about the name change, because there's a lot of speculation always right around these things about whether or not there's any hidden meanings or, deep-rooted secrets and all that. But I think I posted on our social media page that this is really just a way to incorporate the Roman numeral, 9 into it.
Right.
But you said you had a deep, dark secret as to what.
I have figured it out. So J.J. Abrams has kids. So I'm just convinced that they watch My Little Pony. As the father of an 8-year-old girl who has watched lots of My Little Pony, there is a Trixie pony.
Yes.
And so I am convinced that they just happened to have My Little Pony on in the background, and they just said, oh, we should do Trixie because there's an IX in the middle of it, and this will be cute and fun, and have absolutely no meaning to Star Wars whatsoever, because these things don't have to relate to Star Wars whatsoever.
Yep. There you go, folks. You heard it here first. There's no meaning outside of My Little Pony. And, honestly, as a father, if my 4-year-old daughter who loves My Little Pony walked in and said, Dad, can you please name your next major movie after Trixie? Yeah, I would probably do the same thing.
Yeah, be like, sure. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people are having a lot of fun with the Trixie Hobbitses and things like that. So there's some funny stuff going on out there. So amidst all the chaos, if you can find those threads, those are actually pretty fun to read through.
In all seriousness, yeah, I don't put a whole lot of, real estate into what these names mean. I think it's just a name to fun. Put on the back of chairs and make T-shirts, right?
Yeah, and they're fun. I mean, they're just...
Yeah.
It's mostly an inside joke for the crew for the most part, right? So not really for the rest of us.
Yep. So let's move on to Star Wars Women of the Galaxy book by Amy Ratcliffe. So this is a book that's coming out. Was this just announced? Is that right? Like a couple days ago here?
Yeah, this just came out in the last few days. We're recording on June 5th. So this just came out in the last few days. Real quick blurb, it says it's by Amy Ratcliffe, of course, very popular Star Wars contributor. So this features Leia Organa, Rey, Ahsoka, Jyn, Rose, Maz, and a lot more. And they're going to include characters from Solo Star Wars Story as well as Star Wars Resistance, which is kind of interesting. So when this book comes out, I believe this is coming out in October, we should be pretty close to having Resistance. So it's going to gather 75 profiles, and Amy Ratcliffe is going to do some commentary, and they're going to have lots of artwork from talented female and non-binary artists as well. So this is this kind of sounds like a bit of like the official guide type of thing, but with a focus on the women of Star Wars. Is that kind of what it sounds like to you?
Yeah, and that was a question I think I had, because I honestly have not had a chance to read any more about this. And I know there's we talked about there's an interview I think on StarWars.com with Amy Ratcliffe, and I don't know how far they go into a lot of the details, but I guess that question came to me too, was whether or not this would be kind of like an encyclopedia thing, which would be really cool because, growing up before we had any of this stuff, we had these sorts of things in the West End role-playing books, right? They had these character profiles And they had a Han Solo page, a Luke Skywalker page. You had all the main characters, and then they had like stormtroopers, and you get to see their stats, and they had the background, the history. And that was where we went. That was our it was literally called a source book. But that was the only thing at that time for about 5 or 6 years that we had where we could go and see this kind of information, because there was no Wikipedia or no encyclopedia or anything that was cataloging all this stuff or combining it or aggregating it in any way. But I've always liked those things. And I think that's why I've liked the visual guides and the official guide now with Solo so much, because you get that kind of a background with stats and little stories or little snippets in there that kind of have some background or context that really don't play into the bigger picture, but they're just neat to kind of read and flesh that character out a little bit more.
And I'm actually really excited about the artwork. And so they released the cover, which is by Jen.
Oh yeah,
Jen Bartel or Bartle. Apologize if I'm getting the last name right, or wrong. But the cover is Rey with the lightsaber and kind of an interesting pose there, and it's fantastic. And these are the things that really get interesting. So you get these, these discussions of this text about the character and something interesting about them, but then you get this really cool, often unique take on the visualization of those characters as well. And to me, that's really the fun part is getting that visual aspect of it as well as this context that Amy Ratcliffe is going to provide. So I think this is something that might be really, kind of cool and interesting to pick up. So I'm curious to see how thick this book is, how many pages are to it, because 75, that's a lot of profiles and a lot of artwork. So I'm assuming this is going to be on par with the size of like the official guide. Yeah.
Now, did they say they were going to do is it all female artists that are doing the female artwork for this book?
Female and non-binary. Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's awesome. So it'd be a very unique take from some of the other things that we've got from folks like Pablo Hidalgo and things like that. So a little unique take on it. So it should be interesting to see what they come up with. So pretty interesting. So October 2018 is when that's coming out.
All right. Any female character profile that you're looking forward to?
Your favorite, actually. I think they could do really something special with Maz.
With Maz?
Yeah.
No, I hope not.
I really do. And we'll save the rest for Cantina After Dark. But I think Maz could be a really fun one. Actually, this is a good opportunity to do new spins on some of these characters like Maz, though. So they could be interesting, and there could be some other little tidbit in there that might bring you around. So I'm confident this is going to bring Albert around and Maz Kanata.
Yeah, I'm confident it will not.
Have faith, dear listeners. It'll happen eventually.
Man, I'm trying to think. I think Leia is obviously an obvious choice.
Sure.
And Rey's would be something else. But those are...
And like Padme. So I imagine Padme will be in here. They didn't specify it in the blurb. They did go into the rest of the article they did, though. So what else would they talk about Padme? Because she's had obviously quite a bit of screen time. She's had, some novelization in it, and she's not quite got the attention that the fans are really wanting, though. Right. So there's been a lot of outcry of we need a Padme book in particular. So is this going to help fill some of that gap? Not entirely, but maybe it'll give us a little flavor of something unique that we don't know yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
So that could be fun. So I'm looking forward to that.
Looking forward to it. In October, I think. I don't know if we put that out there.
We've said 3 or 4 times now. So October, go pick it up. It's going to be fun.
Oh, all right. I'm not listening. All right. Next up, we have Celebration. So Celebration update. Did we just wait? What was it? Last time we did this show, was it announced already? It was announced.
Yeah. It was announced. We'd forgotten about it. And then I think I misquoted the actual name of the place. So, and I think we even got the dates wrong. We're bad at this.
We're all over this, folks, as you can tell.
Yeah, we are on it, which is really weird because we really are, because we've committed a lot of money already to this thing. So
we have no idea what we're doing.
Right. So it's April 11th through the 15th. It's 5 days. At McCormick Place in Chicago. This is 2019. And so again, today's June 5th. So tickets went on sale. The VIP tickets sold out within, I was on there right when it went live, and I got in the queue and it was 4 minutes, and they were already gone. I refreshed and there was one left, but from some of the reports I read online, this thing was sold out within a minute, which I'm struggling to understand how that's possible.
Well, I think it was they had a $800 and something price tag. Is that right?
$850. Yeah. And it came with a bunch of goodies, lanyards and t-shirts,
a ton of stuff.
Yeah. Lots of things. And of course the prime bait of all of that is to basically have a guaranteed opportunity to get into the panels, right? Which was such a mess with Orlando. I wasn't there, but according to all reports, pretty well documented, it was pretty much a mess. So, but, so I got the 5-day. The pricing just kind of made sense. If you're going to go for 3 days at least, you might as well get the 5-day because $75 a day or $215 for the 5. And then you could pick up a la carte some of the things you could get in the VIP. So if you wanted a lanyard or a t-shirt or a hoodie or whatever, you had the opportunity to go ahead and buy those up front, which was kind of nice to just go and get some of that stuff out of the way.
Yeah. And I foolishly tried to do a purchase today in between meetings. I had like 5 minutes and I thought, okay, let me get on here and just grab my ticket, old guy that I am. I go in there and I'm like, oh my, I was overwhelmed with the amount of like you said, the a la carte stuff.
Right.
And then I found myself clicking to see more details. Next thing I know, I was like out of time. So like, screw it, I have to table that and come back to it. So
the good news for the regular tickets is they'll be there for quite a while. I did go into the queue for the hotel just to kind of see how that was. So where the queue for tickets was just a few minutes, the queue for the hotel, I was in the queue for about 45 minutes. And by the time I logged right in at 1 p.m. Central and in the queue 45 minutes. And then pretty much everything, especially Wednesday, Thursday, were sold out and unavailable. So
yep,
the rooms went quick. The prices for the rooms were actually really, really good. We're talking $200 or less for the most part. So the rooms were really good, and these were really good hotels, like the Embassy Suites. Hilton's, I think, were in there, and some other recognizable hotels. So they weren't, even Garden Inn and things like that were on there, but they weren't, little rinky-dink hotels.
The Dewdrop Inn.
Yeah, they were quality rooms. So that was
Beagle.
That was nice. They had that. Of course, very popular, but we'd already booked rooms to avoid this kind of chaos. So,
yeah.
But a lot of other they've kind of sneakily added more stuff to the website. So they've got some basic stage information where the stages are. They haven't defined exactly which arena or place they're going to be, but they're starting to fill some of that in. So checking back regularly, they're going to keep dropping little tidbits of that in there. Doesn't really mean a lot to me because I don't live in Chicago or know what they're talking about. But as we get into the end of the year and the beginning of next year, we'll get a lot more of that clarified.
Yeah, and as far as our presence there, us being the Cantina Cast, myself, Mike, Jonesy, and then we've got a number of Discord users. Well, some of them are Patreon users or listeners, but we've got some folks from Discord as well. And then we will, as we get closer, we'll start solidifying our plans, and we definitely are planning a meet and greet kind of thing of some type.
Yep.
So yeah, more details to come. So stay tuned for that.
Speaking of which, last bit of news, and this is just kind of another friendly reminder. We've got our Keep Cantina Cast Weird event happening. What is it? We're almost like 10 days away, aren't we? Yeah, week and a half.
On the 16th.
Yep.
So we'll put the link in there for anyone that's interested. But again, we are meeting up here in Austin or down here in Austin or depending on where you are. We're going to do some lunch and drinks before we go see Solo. And then afterwards we'll do dinner and drinks and then probably more drinks. But yeah, we'll have a good time and everybody's welcome to join us. So I think we've got some folks that have already signed up. And again, if you're interested in doing it, just click the link. You can sign up there. Looking forward to seeing everybody there or whoever shows up, I should say.
Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of fun. Looking really forward to it.
Be lots of pictures taken.
Yeah, we'll try to get that on social media too, so you can kind of see what we're up to. It probably not be all that exciting to look at, but we'll try to make it exciting.
Yeah, we will. We'll have to full Photoshop ourselves into like some weird, backdrop or something just to
Photoshop Mike in there.
If we need to. Yeah. Well, hey, you're taking my ideas away. Trust me, I do have a plan for Mike because he said he couldn't be there.
Well, and you've got that stock photo of George Lucas. So,
oh yeah,
I think George is
in there somewhere.
Yeah, I think George is going to show up. I'm pretty sure about that.
He probably will. Right. All right. Well, that's all we really have for news this week, and we will be right back.
Maybe you notice you have a little less hair than you used to have, but you're not sure there's a real solution. The thing is, there are 2 clinically proven medications that let you keep your hair. And now, they're inexpensive and easy to get. You don't need to lose your hair if you don't want to. And that's why I have to tell you about Keeps. For 5 minutes now and just $1 a day, you'll never have to worry about your hair loss again. Getting started with Keeps is so easy. Sign up takes less than 5 minutes. Just answer a few questions, snap some photos, a licensed doctor remotely reviews your information and recommends the right treatment for you, all without leaving your couch. Now, I did this just to test it out and see how easy it would be for all of you, and it is easy. Keeps offers generic versions of the only 2 FDA-approved hair loss products out there. Some of you have probably tried them before, but but you never got them this easy for this price. Keeps is only $10 to $35 a month. Plus, you get your first month free. One hell of a deal for getting to keep your hair. There's no reason to put this off any longer. Stop hair loss today the easy way with Keeps. To receive your first month of treatment free, go to keeps.com/CantinaCast. That's KEEPS.com/CantinaCast. That's a free month of treatment at keeps.com/CantinaCast. Keeps hair today, hair tomorrow.
All right, so let's get to the main show. And just as a quick disclaimer, we're obviously going to spoil Solo. I can't understand why anyone at this point would be listening to this show if you haven't seen the movie. But if you haven't, expect spoilers. Turn the radio off. Turn your podcast off. What's not a radio? Nobody listens to radio anymore. But turn your podcast off because we are going to spoil it. And we talked about it earlier. But man, some of these questions are really good. I thought, okay, I'll just take a look at these and no big deal. But yeah, as I started diving into them, I really started to have to think about some of these, which is always good, a good indicator that we've got some good content.
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So we got a lot of questions. We're going to try to get to all of them or as many as we can. And also we had to paraphrase and summarize these a bit because we got some really lengthy, detailed questions and commentary as well, which is fantastic. We love it. So please keep doing that. But we've got to condense it a little bit. So be patient with us. We're trying to get to the core of your question or conversation so that we can actually be able to answer it without you here in the room with us. So
yeah.
But
all right, let's start. Yeah, let's start with the Patreon users. I'm gonna call them users. Our Patreon patrons, the paying members,
part of the family here.
Yeah, part of the family because they pay us. First one's from Lucid Truth. Question: is the Falcon the fastest ship in the galaxy, or does Hahn just say that it is?
So I always equate this to the Falcon as whatever Hahn needs or wants it to be. And if we look at the true form of the question, I think in that moment of the Kessel Run, it might have been one of the fastest ships in the galaxy. But this is actually fairly well documented out there. If you want to get really geeky and technical about it, the Falcon is kind of in the middle of speed of ships when you look at the scale. And there was a great infographic that came out in a book just recently that actually visually showed you all the ships and had the Falcon smack dab in the middle, which was a lot of fun. But I kind of equate this is just whatever Hahn wants it to be or whatever he needs that ship to be to fill whatever the situation is. And that's the beauty of Han Solo, I think, as well, is that he's just going to fill that gap and say, yeah, that's absolutely what it is. Like, no question.
Right. So I think when we see the Falcon in the Solo movie, I think it's a fast ship. I don't know that it's the fastest ship. I think somewhere between Solo in episode 4, I think he probably makes these, self-claim special modifications, right, that make it faster than, right. He says he's able to outrun these, Corellian
bulk cruisers.
Yeah, bulk cruisers and all that. So I think there's probably truth in that, but I don't think, I don't think what we see in the Solo movie is particularly that ship. We know he dropped some weight in this movie by jettisoning the escape pod. So there's one modification, if you want to call it that. They certainly lost a lot of weight and, from the ship being torn apart and all that. But going back to like the EU and stuff, it was always a question about which was faster. Is it a, TIE interceptor? You always had Slave 1 was always rumored to be faster than the Falcon itself. But I think it would be cool for them to allude maybe in an upcoming movie, right? If they do a Solo 2, a Solo 3, allude to like that he does make these special modifications that he talks about and boasts about in episode 4. And it comes from maybe some firsthand experience that he had or background now that he's dealt with like the coaxium. Because that was one of those things that before the movie, I don't remember this ever being talked about. I know there was I briefly touched on one of the video games, and I don't even remember the name of it now. That just kind of recently came out. But one of the mobile games mentioned coaxium in it. But it would be cool if there was somewhere he, used his background or his, firsthand knowledge now of this particular thing that allowed him to kind of engineer the Falcon in a way that it does give him those modifications that allow him to kind of go faster. I think that would give more gravity or more weight to the whole coaxium thing because it was kind of played a big role, obviously, in the Solo movie, right?
Right. Yeah, it did. And actually, the official guide has a lot of interesting, or I say a lot, it's got a little bit of interesting about how they apply the coaxium. So I encourage people to go out there and do that. I don't want to get too in the details on it because I don't know that I understand it all the way. They talked about like having a coating over the hyperdrive cell or something like that. So it was interesting how that kind of pairs up with fuel. But Yeah, this is also another one of those things. If you're looking about in the Falcon's class of ship, this is another one where maybe in the class of ship, it is clearly faster, especially after the modifications that he's made. So yeah, I'm on board with that too.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do. I'm going to ask you one then. How about Cab? So Cab asks,
okay,
we love you, Cab. If we get a direct sequel to Solo, what EU characters would you like to see make up Jabba's team? Cab believes that a natural fit would be Dengar. So what do you think about that?
So I'm going to go with Aura Singh, Sam Wessel, Jango Fett. I'm kidding.
Mara Jade.
I'm kidding. No, I was going to say Jodo Cass is my last one, but no. All right, no, in all seriousness. So if I had to say there was an EU character,
right?
So I would say, well, maybe not even EU, but so Boba Fett, I would really want. I do really feel like they should stay away from Boba Fett in the makeup in the sequel movies, right? If they go that route, but I would like to say I think IG-88 would be my first choice, and only because they've already broken the ice with him on 2 episodes of Forces of Destiny, right? He's already been in 2 of those. He was one with was it Jin? No, it was Ahsoka and Leia, right? That was the first one, and then right when Solo launched, like the day after, they released the second Forces of Destiny episode where IG-88 and Hondo meet up, or they're after Kira, right? So they've already kind of broken that ice twice with it, and then he did show up in the Darth Vader comic. And really, my only justification for this is the fact that I, growing up, he was like so. My brother and I would have all these Star Wars action figures out, and we would have these battles. And the way we did our battles, it was like we picked our teams, right? So I would pick one, then he would pick one, and we'd just trade off back and forth. So the first picks were obviously Luke, Vader, and Boba Fett. But then once we got to that, it was always, for me at least, IG-88 was, if he hadn't already been picked, he was the next character I was going to get. So I've always had this thing for IG-88. I just think he's a cool looking character. And I don't think he got, well, he didn't. He didn't get a lot of, he didn't do a lot. They didn't do him any justice in Empire Strikes Back because he was just sitting there like this monolith of a slab of metal that, just kind of barely turned his head or pivot. I don't even think
physically
there was no articulation.
Physically they couldn't do anything with him.
They couldn't do anything with him at the time. But, here we are, fast forward 40 years later, and we've got the technology, we've got the means to make it look really cool. And I think that would give him, give him his due right that as the assassin droid.
I so bad want a bounty hunter movie. I'm getting more and more excited about that underworld bounty hunter type of thing every day.
Yeah. So anyways, a long drawn out answer there. What about you?
So this is a less glamorous one, but I was thinking like Talon Card. And the reason why, so he fits, he's a little too much like Han Solo, but there's association with Jabba in the legends already. So he's kind of for those who don't know, he's kind of a smuggler. He really deals in intelligence and data for the most part. So they could kind of spin his backstory to be more of an associate with Jabba in the first place. But where it got interesting is in the EU and the legends, after Jabba's organization fell and after Jabba was killed, Talon Card actually acquired all of Jabba's intel and his empire and things like that. So he was actually vital to it. And he was not necessarily a villain or anything like that. He was just a smuggler for hire. But it's not really
an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's not really a glamorous pick, but it's just something that's I think would be an interesting one because he already kind of fits. And if you want someone on, Cab had mentioned Jabba's team specifically. So these are less mercenary-ish type of things. They have to be able to work together. I know that's not necessarily universal. We have lots of examples of that, but someone who would actually fit that mold and that would maybe work with him more regularly, that's a little different than a bounty hunter. Talon Card kind of came to mind.
Yeah. I like the pick. Yeah. I mean, he's a cool character. He a lot of times he gets written off as a poor man's Han Solo, but
yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And that's the same with like Dash Rendar, right? Dash Rendar was very much Han Solo while Han Solo was in Carbonite in, Shadows of the Empire. So it's just one of those things of, these characters are all very similar. So you don't want to water it down in a movie setting, but I just thought, who kind of fits that mold and who would be interesting to see there that has a take on it in the Legends world.
Yeah. All right. I'll take Imperial Moonwalker. Imperial Moonwalker. Ron Howard recently stated after he came on board, the script didn't specifically state Maul for the big reveal, but instead was written as, quote, a boss. During production, they narrowed down the candidates and Maul was chosen. If you were in charge of selecting the boss for the film, who would you choose, excluding Maul, and why?
All right, so I was just watching season 3 of Clone Wars, and Black Sun came up. And so one of my favorite characters from the Black Sun era of the comics and everything was Prince Caesar. I think that's how you pronounce his last name, right? And he was so cool. I mean, and so he has Black Sun. There's a connection to Vader. They don't really get along, or they don't get along at all. He also has a connection to the Hutts. When you talk about Kira, he's got these pheromones that you could use to influence and seduce, if you will, Kira. But you could also introduce the planet of Falcon, and it could just, this is a totally different villain. This is kind of in the same mold as like a Thrawn, right? But I even view Prince Caesar as even more dangerous. He's just very cutthroat, and I don't know. It's just a different character that already blends with some of these other characters that we know really well. And I think that would be really cool and interesting to see. And it still fits within the Solo timeline and universe, if you will, that we got to see in the movie. And so I think that'd be really cool and interesting. Plus you have a new race that we haven't seen on screen, a new, completely new species and all of that. So I think that would be cool, and introduce some of these other crime organizations that we just hear, kind of in passing by.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a way better answer than I think I've got. Cause that's a great question. I think I would like to have gone with somebody maybe entirely new. I don't even know that I really want like somebody that was already that we've seen before. I mean, you can make the argument that Caesar is really not known because he's not, but I would like to see somebody new, menacing, right? A very distinct look and background. Right. Be bold and going with somebody new, because you've got this. You don't have to make them live, and we've already seen what happened with Snoke, so it doesn't really, not that big of a deal if you kill him off in 2 movies. But
right.
But yeah, I mean, I'd like to see it carry over, like have that person kind of carry over, and then you could argue that Maul could, and would do something to. I'm kind of losing my track here, but I don't know. This is a really good question. I really don't know. I just want somebody like that's in charge, like a Scarface, a Vito Corleone, right, or even like a Mr. Blonde from like Reservoir Dogs. If you ever,
so are you kind of describing a Voss type of character then?
Yeah, but somebody like, I don't know, Voss didn't do it for me. Like I really he was cool, but he wasn't as menacing. He wasn't as crazy. I mean, I think we talked about it last show. Like he kind of walked that line. He got right up to the fence, I guess, for me. But he didn't go over the edge. And I'm not saying he has to necessarily be violent. We don't need to see violence for that point to come across. But I would like to see somebody that's just completely, unpredictable, and everyone is in fear without it being like a Sith Lord or a Force user or anything like that. I don't know that we need all of that, but I just want like this Godfather kind of figure. Because I don't know, and this is probably me just pining for a more
on the same page,
mobster kind of movie that we didn't get maybe necessarily with this one.
And that's why I went Caesar, because I had the same type of thought that you did, and I just happened to see that name pop up as soon as I saw Black Sun, and because I thought it just fit what you're describing pretty well. Ruthless, but has these other characteristics. I mean, hell, he seduced Princess Leia for a while, right? So. Yeah. A lot of different ways you can go with that. Yeah. Voss is interesting though, because they could have taken him in a little bit different spin to get him where, he wasn't that far off from what you're describing. So that would have been an interesting take. If you take Maul out of the equation, could they have restructured that role a little bit to, really enhance him and take away some of that maybe it's that casual nature that he has where, hey, it's a party type of thing. And it worked for the character they were writing, but for what you're describing, you take that off and you keep it edgy all the time, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And Maul was, I mean, he wasn't the obvious choice, but he certainly had the most star power, right? If you had to think of all the people that were leftovers from the Clone Wars, I mean, a lot of those crime bosses and stuff that we knew in the Clone Wars, a lot of them just died for a lot of different reasons. So there really wasn't anyone outside of Maul. I couldn't even really think of any, and that's where I was struggling earlier. Is I was trying to think like who lived from these, from that we know of
that you would have cared to see anyway, right? You're not right. You don't want to see more pneumonians, right? So.
Yeah. And even like the Pikes, like I couldn't think of like, well, who the heck was running the Pikes after all this? And I honestly couldn't remember who it was anymore.
When I was watching Clone Wars, the Pikes weren't all that interesting, to be honest with you, at least not for me.
Yeah, they look cool, but...
Yeah, they were different, but I kind of liked them in Solo, the way they looked with the shielding on the face rather than the exposed kind of alien look.
Yeah.
But All right, so let's move on to Utini. So as much as he hated Rey's 14 parsecs comment in Force Awakens when he heard it, he thinks he likes it a little bit more now that we've seen Han fudge his numbers at least twice. So does this movie make any parts of previous movies better for you?
Well, so not specifically about the Kessel. This isn't specifically about the Kessel Run, which maybe I'll come back to. But I really like that the like that little connected tissue now between this movie and a 3PO's line of "Sir, I don't know where your ship learned to communicate, but it has the most peculiar dialect." Right. Mm-hmm. That really is tops for me. And you could say that it's you can make the argument we're drawing too much, or we're exposing too much, or telling too much. But I just think that's a really cool line. And I think I like the fact that Kenobi hadn't heard about the Kessel Run even more now, because you go back to I don't want to sound blasphemous in saying this, so let me just put that out there in full disclosure. But what if in this next movie, or 2 movies or sequels or whatever, this becomes like this running gag where he's going around asking people and boasting about the Kessel Run, and no one has heard of this thing. Because if you think about it, who would even know at this point, right? Because so put Kira to the side. All right, let's just take her out for the sake of this argument, right? The whole operation was completely hush-hush from the beginning, right? Because Voss didn't want to ruin, his association with the Pikes, and so this was all kind of done under the table kind of thing, right? Well, Voss is dead, so all that knowledge died with him. Beckett was aware that the Kessel Run was done, but he's dead, so there's no trail there. It's it's not self-serving for Lando to go out and advertise it, because he's already got the reputation as being a fast, a good pilot or a fast ship and all that stuff. So they're really, he's got no interest in doing all that. So really that only leaves like Enfys Nest, right? Who would even know that this Kessel Run was done in the short amount of time. So, she's got a lot going on. So she's not going to go run around boasting about the Kessel Run anyway. So really all you're left with is Han and Chewie to spread the news or the tale or the legend or the myth or whatever you want to call it. And now that Chewie knows that it wasn't even 12 parsecs to begin with, it's just even funnier. So I think it would be cool if they, over the next 3 movies, if they were able to tie all that back. This becomes a running joke where he's asking people and no one's heard of this. I think it would give us a different spin when we hear Kenobi say that, should I have? When he asked him about, have you never heard of the Millennium Falcon kind of thing. But
what's even more funny about it is that with the Imperials chasing him, they don't even know he survived. So they don't even know that the ship survived what they were doing, much less that they would even bother to care to track the trajectory, right? So at least at that point in time, maybe over time, they learned that the coaxium survived. But yeah, it's one of those things. They didn't even know if the ship made it through or not, and none of the TIE fighter pilots made it through. So it did. So the one for me that has a lot more meaning now is the salute in Jedi from Han to Lando, knowing that the exchange between L3 and Lando and the relationship that they had, and clearly the caring between all of that, and now with the ship itself and Lando taking back over the captain status of the ship, even if only temporarily. So that has really stuck with me the last week and a half since this movie, that I just really enjoyed. Actually, I'm going around giving people a little 2-finger salute all the time these days. And I don't, like, some of them might know what it means, but they're not letting on that I do or that they do. And so I get a kick out of it. So there you go. Geeky stuff is coming through every which way.
So do you think they need to do that again? Like if they did another movie, like a Solo 2, Solo 3, do you think that's something that just becomes a repeat in those movies as well, just to kind of hit it home when it does come back around in Jedi?
I hope if they do, I hope it's more akin to what we see in Jedi, less so than just in the pilot. And this is what we do every single time we take off in the ship, that it has some meaning to it, like it did in Jedi. Like you have this moment where they don't know they're going to see each other again. And a bit of a reunion now that we can look at it a bit retroactively. But I would like that more of that moment rather than what we saw in Solo moving forward, just because that way, otherwise it does get campy and a little bit too predictable and not really all that interesting. And it waters it down. We don't want to water it down. We want it to still mean something.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. All right, let's look at JW. What's he going by these days? Is it like Enfys Nest? Is that it?
JW. We have a couple of Enfys Nests now, I think, in Discord.
Yeah, there's a few of them, right? Yeah. I'm confused. There's so many of them. Will the real Enfys Nest please stand up?
All right, JW. With this question.
Yep. What would you like to see happen with Enfys Nest, if anything at all?
I want the backstory now. I want to see what happened. And I think I'd rather see this in the book and comic books. I think this is what really lines up well because I want to see it visually. But I think I'm going to go to the comics. And I know like there's some, not everyone likes getting the comics and they get a bit drawn out. But what the comics allow you to do is they allow you to build these characters up both visually and with the print over time. And you don't necessarily, this doesn't even have to be a one shot. This can be either a series or it can just be an extended arc or something like that, where we can actually see this character grow and develop. And I say that because when I think about Phasma and the route they went with Phasma, the Phasma comic books, I kind of like them a little bit better than I like the actual Phasma book. Not that the Phasma book was bad by any stretch, but it's just the combination of things. You can see that. And the writing in the comics these days is so good. It is really, really good what the stories they're able to tell in some of these titles. I would really like to see that. Maybe a TV series would be kind of interesting too, but I don't know how well that would really sell to know if that's actually reasonable. So I kind of keep coming back to the comic books now.
Yeah. So I have some thoughts here, and they're kind of half thought out, but and then they may so she's the prototype, right, for the rebellion, and he keeps saying that, and I don't know if that's 100% true or wholly true, but that was my takeaway of what I walked away with, is that this was the start of it, rather, to some extent, right? Mm-hmm. The fact that we had two tubes and Weasel, was it Weasel? Yeah, Weasel in the crew.
Right.
I would like to see some kind of direct connection between her and Saw Gerrera. And I'd like to see maybe it like in a novel or even like an animated series that kind of details the connection. Like I want to see Enfys Nest meet up with the Partisans, or maybe that group that we're looking at there is the Partisans. And this is and Saw Gerrera comes in. And at some point, either he's taken her under her wing, or at this point, I think by the timeline, and I have not done the math on this, but we could even have like a Jyn Erso, right? Yeah. We could have a Jyn Erso in that timeline as well. And maybe we have adventures with Jyn and Enfys Nest, now we didn't get a whole lot of detail in the book. Was it the Rebellion book, The Rise to? I'm drawing a blank on the one.
Rebel Rising. Yep.
Rebel Rising. Thank you. So in that book, we got we just know that when Jyn was young, there were people that were just constantly coming, going, right?
Right.
And they allude to the fact that there was all these people that Saul was connected with, and they were all kind of, fragmented rebellions, so to speak. But I think there's a lot of opportunity here to kind of draw those two together, and it would help us link how Two Tubes got over from Enfys Nest's gang and the Cloud Riders over into the Saw Gerrera. And I think it would we could get more for Jyn Erso that we didn't get in that novel, and we could get more of her teaming up with Enfys Nest, or Enfys Nest and Saw Gerrera starting to butt heads, because we don't get the sense from her that she's necessarily as volatile as like Saw Gerrera or fanatical as Saw Gerrera. But I think that would be an interesting dynamic to see play out as well.
No, that's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. That would be fun to see her and Saw Gerrera. And I think this is one of these things you could do one of these, here's the current and here's a flashback type of thing as well. And you could draw these parallels about where she was even younger, but also see where she's developing now in this timeline of where she's at, and all the way up to, closer to the Rogue One storyline where Jyn and Saw Gerrera kind of come back together. But yeah, I think this is really fertile ground right here too. And that's a really good point, because Gerrera's doing a lot of different things, and we don't 100% know everything that he was up to right now.
Right. And the only thing that's kind of, that gives me pause about that particular theory or speculation would be the fact that we're still playing in that timeline, right? And I know we've talked about this on previous episodes, is do we want to get out of this, or are we getting pulled back in? I think Enfys Nest has given us a good reason to go back in. I think people, as like I said earlier, everybody was complaining, I want out. But at the end of the day, you give us a good character, give us a good storyline, I think people would buy into it more than they're willing to admit to. So,
well, we've beat it to death, but I mean, this is one of these things where you can limit your timeline or limit your story to these parts that we don't really know anything about, even though it fits within the larger picture within these timelines that we're already really familiar with, to where you only have these ancillary touches to them. So you don't have to get weighted down by everything that's going on in the galaxy. You can tell this individual story and have these interesting components where with these characters that we know nothing about, and we can explore them because they're different and they're new, and it's a different spin on it. Or even if it's a similar type of arc, just a slightly different way or a slightly different set of experiences that go with it can be really interesting and a lot of fun to do.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, thanks, J-Dub. Darth Vapid. Here's a fun one for you. This is right up your alley. So do you think there's a significance with Dryden Voss's desk that is made from obsidian from Exar Kun's tomb, now making Kun part of canon? His real question is, what are the chances that Snoke is Kun, who is definitely an ancient evil, in quotes, which is what TFA was almost named? And then how tired are we of Snoke theories?
I like the last question first. How tired are we of Snoke theories? I'll take that one first. Pretty tired, but let me take the other two. So first question, do you think significant so this was cleared up on Twitter very, very recently, sometime last week. And I forget, I'm almost 99% sure it was Leland Chee. If it wasn't Leland Chee, it was Matt Martin. And I know it wasn't Pablo because he's on vacation. He's closed his Twitter account for the temporarily. But one of those two guys answered this and addressed it. And basically, to summarize what they said, is that when this stuff pops up like in visual guides, and it probably pops up more in the art of books, that a lot of times that's just stuff that the artists throw in to kind of spur imagination, creativity, give people things to work with, and doesn't necessarily imply that they are canonized in any way. In fact, I think he goes so far as to say that, look, it is not canon. It was mentioned in one of the books, whatever book it was. But again, it was really in the sake of creativity and kind of like brainstorming, right? That was really all it was. So there wasn't anything there. Now, that said, I like the Snoke theory. I mean, I'll take, honestly, any theory that gives Snoke more weight than we got from what he was in The Last Jedi, because I just don't believe that he wasn't important and that he's not important. I really believe that he was at one point, and anyone that kind of argues or feels like that he never was is, you're just fooling yourself, because
right.
We know, those that know, we know he was something at some point. So anyways, I think I would like to have just something there. So I don't know if this is the Snoke theory I would, die on a hill for, but I definitely would like to see some way that someone gets creative and kind of gives him more context and a background and a purpose than what he had in The Last Jedi.
Right. And Exar Kun's an interesting one because he's an Old Republic character, right? That was relevant in the Legends universe all the way up to Luke Skywalker's Jedi Temple on Yavin. So he built the temples on Yavin 4, and his, I think, spirit was in prison there, if I remember right. So yep. I could definitely see from a concept wise that makes a lot of sense to include some of those things if you want to start bundling some of that back in. I kind of look at it a little bit differently of these are interesting artifacts to Dryden Voss that are, collectibles, because we saw the holocron that presumably is real, because it seems like in the official guide that they said it was real. But there are these just interesting little tidbits we can factor into it. But I kind of get to the point where, is this just too confusing and too much? And you make a great point about the art books and the concept art. These are great ways to spur ideas and spur conversation and get thoughts out on the table of where all these different things, and you get the sense of who Voss is, right? And that's what these are trying to do. That these are trying to set the stage of who Voss is with all of these interesting artifacts and these random things that he has, to give us that sense of where he comes from and what he's interested in. You don't have to tell us what it is. You can just show us on screen.
Yeah. And
I think that's really interesting. And I think that these guides and the art books are really cool to fill in those gaps, especially if you're really interested in this stuff. But I don't read these things very often, although I've started doing a lot more recently. But they're interesting to read, but you got to take them a bit with a grain of salt, because many of them are a bit revisionist in nature as well, that we try to kind of shoehorn back into the world that we've seen on screen and the world that we've enjoyed.
Yep. All right, let's get to Joa, Mr. Joa's question. What do you guys think of the way Easter eggs were handled in general? So he thought that they were handled better than any other Disney Star Wars movie so far. Uses more character development than, quote, how to fix it in such and such scene. So he gave some examples, like, so Beckett and life lessons with Chewie over the Jark table. There was nostalgia, humor, but there was character development. And then he also had the Han and Lando fake out punch. All right, so it gives us more context, more background. Right. It's an Easter egg. It's a throwback to Empire Strikes Back kind of thing.
Yeah. And so one of the ones that he also had commented on was some of the ones like Finn tossing the remote that Luke trained with in the Falcon. They were more casual and a bit throwaway, if you will. I'm paraphrasing Joe's statements here, and so I'm very much with you, Joe. These were really cool the way that they did these, that they were either in the background or they were subtle, and you got these connections with the characters. And so the film really tried to embrace it more than anything else. And we said it with the salute before. I thought the salute was really well done. And there were other just really fun ones that were there. So the old Republic era Mando armor in Voss's office, which of course got us all kind of going crazy. What's that in the background in the trailer that people somehow made that out? Because I was really fuzzy back there. The Cloud City model in the Falcon, I thought was another really cool touch where he's already got this prototype figured out. And what's really neat about all this stuff is that they're in there and you don't necessarily see all of them, but you can see where they have a certain meaning and they fit in more so than the ones that are really overt, and which I really enjoy that. But yeah, I mean, I want to keep coming back to the salute just because it was so cool. But yeah, I'm with you. I thought they did a really good job of bridging the nostalgic aspect of these things without really making it overkill and eye-rolling type of moments where you just, it completely pulls you out of the movie and you don't believe any of this stuff. You're like, okay, well, they're just checking boxes now. And I never felt like they were checking boxes or that it was just something to get a giggle out of the crowd for the most part.
Yeah. And I think they did a great service, honestly, especially to like the diehard fans, right? In, like in our circles within the show or Discord, social media. I mean, all of those were very well received. So credit to John Kasdan because Larry or, his dad put all this stuff in there. I kind of envision them writing the script together. And then at one point Dad writes out, Val mentions bounty hunters and John goes, no, Dad, put Bosk and the Zahn sisters. And, right. Zahn, yeah, Z-A-N, Zahn sisters. Trust me, they'll love it, right? He was the one. He's such a huge diehard fan that a lot of that stuff I think we saw in there was put into them. But I think it's just kind of a fine line, too, because I don't know that, there were a lot of people that I know who saw this movie, honestly. There are a lot of people who saw this movie and that they didn't get any of those Easter eggs. And that's cool. I think where the fine line is when you start alienating people, right? You start excluding them from the fun or being able to really keep up and follow because they're not in understanding where a lot of these things are coming from. I think if they're able to do that fine balance, which I think this movie did well, trust me, I'm not saying that they didn't do that well, but I can see where it can go too far. And as an avid fan of like the TV show Lost, that was one where unless you were in and really in, there were times when you would just get completely lost in terms of what they were alluding to and what they were doing, because you really had to have all of that memorized and all that context. And for Star Wars, because there is so much history and there is so much context, that it can be a fine line that can be crossed. I think you can probably go too far in writing a lot of these Easter eggs and tributes and callbacks and all that stuff, where you start alienating the general audience and they're unable to keep up. So again, I'm not saying this movie did that, but maybe just something to be wary of, I guess, as we go forward, that they're not going that far in right. brushing people off.
Right. And one of the things that Joe pointed out was the fake out punch. And I got to be totally honest with you, this is almost embarrassing. I almost didn't pick up on that because the scenario was set up right to where it made a lot of sense that Hahn would be pretty upset that Lando just bailed on him, in their moment of need, no less, where it looked like they were going to have a showdown with Enfys Nest and the Cloud Rider. So I didn't even really notice. I was like, oh wait, that's what just happened, and that just.
Well, and I don't think we
go for it.
I don't think we got the reverse yet. Like, I don't think we know the story yet.
I don't think so.
About why, Lando could potentially be pissed off at Hahn, right?
Right.
Because Chewie says, something, and he's like, oh, surely he's forgot about it. It's been, for a long time, whatever, paraphrasing.
Yeah, I'm assuming
I don't think we got that story yet.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's not winning the Falcon. I'm assuming that's not it. But yeah. But that was when I almost didn't catch it. And I was like, oh man, it just worked because it was that's probably what I would have done. I would have just clocked him. All right.
You got the next one here.
Okay. So we got an awesome email from Cade. And so he said, first of all, your podcast is amazing. So thank you so much. He looks forward to it every week and oftentimes listen to each episode multiple times throughout the week. So we certainly appreciate those kind words means a lot to us, and we're glad you're enjoying the show, and hopefully we can keep doing this for you. So his question was, what if Kira puts on the Mandalorian armor from Dryden Sweet and assumes the role of Fett? Yeah.
Well, so I think the theory is cool, and it's kind of sick. It's probably not going to happen, but I think there is something cool in there that if we get 2 or 3 more movies for Kira, I would like to see, and maybe we kind of talked this, well, no, we haven't really talked about it yet. I would like to see maybe Kira go through that evolution where she becomes the antagonist, right? Whether she is the leader, whether she's a leader of the Crimson Dawn, or better yet, maybe she becomes the leader of Crimson Dawn at some point. Because, Maul's going to have to leave this group, whether on his own accord or, it falls at the hands of someone else, Kenobi, but somewhere he's going to lose his power. But I think it would be cool to kind of see her rise, because she's in, right? From this movie, if you got nothing else from her character, is she's already committed herself to this life. I mean, she's been practically branded by the Crimson Dawn on her wrist. Yeah. I mean, literally she's branded on there, right? So she's all in. She doesn't think there really is no path for her at this point. This is her lot in life. This is her destiny, is to stay with these guys. So, I mean, what better way to really kind of drive a wedge or drive something into the heart of Solo by, the one person that, that defined him for 3 years and probably a little bit more after this, than for her to completely just, turn away from him and leave him and really rise up through the ranks and become, the antagonist and get in his way and all that. I mean, I think that would really shatter this guy, or at least put him into the point where he no longer trusts anyone. Because if there's any one person apart from Chewie that we know he's going to trust indefinitely, undoubtedly, it's Kira. And what better way to break that than to make her like the antagonist? So I do like the aspect of her. I mean, not necessarily donning the armor and becoming a bounty hunter or anything like that, right. But the character development of her becoming where she is, where we see her in Solo, and then becoming really an antagonist, and being a thorn in his side would be I think compelling.
Right. I think like I said, I was watching the Clone Wars episodes, and what would be interesting though would be if something like this were to happen, Maul has no love lost for the Mandalorians in general. I mean, he kind of dominated their culture.
Yeah, they're tools.
Yeah, they were tools. Death Watch was very much an instrument to build his empire and to, make those inroads in order to build this entire empire. But it would be interesting to see if she were to do something like that, how would he respond in that regard? But I think there's zero chance of this really happening. And I'm kind of with you. She's made a name for herself now well enough that I don't think this is necessary to step behind the armor. She's very much front and center. I'd actually rather her just take that mantle on and just lead from the front. And this is who I am, and this is what my organization now looks like, and this is what we're going to do about it. And you're right. And then what's Hahn going to do about it? Does he have to pull away? Does he just cut bait, or is he, how does he respond then, rather than Darth Maul responding?
Yep. All right. BC White has a couple of quick fire questions. First one, and they're all related to Kira. Is she going to be this huge mob boss behind Maul now?
I don't know about huge mob boss. I still see her as still a bit of a lieutenant, but you could definitely see that she's rising in the ranks. So you could argue huge mob boss is not far behind if she's not already there.
Yeah, I would, and I'll just go back to my previous answer. Maybe not in this movie. I think if they do a third movie, and depending on where they take the character, maybe she does get there. I don't think she's gonna, unseat Maul physically or in any way. But I think if he does step down or leaves for whatever reason, I think she would take over. But there's got to be an end to her story there at some point. But yeah, I can see her stepping into that role. What happened in the 3 years when she was separated from Hahn?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because we have an idea, but she was very bright-eyed and a bit naive when they got split. And so a lot has happened. So I'm assuming she had to make a lot of sacrifices and a lot of deals, if you will. And when I mean sacrifices, I mean just giving up parts of her soul type of things. And she alluded to that in the movie where, she's done things. Of course, everyone says they've done things, but clearly she's And the more I thought about this movie with the interactions with Voss, she very much steps in and leads the conversation. So she is in charge for the most part on some of these things. And so she clearly has made a lot of headways, and you don't do that in these organizations without really, clearing the path for yourself and stabbing people in the back, most likely literally. So clearly something happened there with her and Voss as well. It's very suggestive in the movie, at least.
Yeah. I mean, as I say, yeah, exactly. Like, we know, like, they allude to Voss rescued her, and she's got some kind of like life debt, right? She owes him something, or at least she feels that way. And maybe it goes to the point where, again, she got branded literally on her arm, and so she becomes this property of Crimson Dawn. But we know she was on the run at some point. So going back to, again, how much weight you hold in this is really up to you. But if you go back to Forces of Destiny, we know that she's running from IG-88 on Ord Mantell. So somewhere, she's running in these circles, and now she's got bounty hunters that are after her, and there's a price on her head, right? And that all takes place after in that 3-year span. But I'm not sure how much we're going to get from her backstory given the financial success of the Solo movie. So yeah, if it does come out,
this is kind of one-shot territory. I hate to keep going back to comics, guys, but this is where we get a lot of it these days in the movie and the books and the comic books.
Yeah, and you're right. And so depending on where they go with this, I think if we get it, it's going to be in a comic. It's going to be one of the lesser medias, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but just one of the sub tiers of media. And really, I think it's all we're going to really get is just kind of some side stories, or maybe a one shot of a scenario or several situations in which she rose to the rank of being a lieutenant. And I don't know how much of that is, or what those stories look like, but I don't think we'll get anything more than that. But I think it's safe to say, but that's definitely what happened in those 3 years.
Right.
So, okay. So next question, same line with Kira. Did that harden her, or just? No, I'm sorry. Did that harden her, or we just don't know yet?
No, I'm pretty sure it did, and I think we were both along those same lines of it definitely did harden her, and Hahn is a weak spot. So it kind of threw her off guard, and she had to figure out how she wanted to adjust and play that. But I think it has definitely hardened her, and we saw that when she left him.
Yeah, and there's actually a piece in the official guide that talks about how she's combined her years of experience as a scrum rat with her, her newfound maturity, and that there's a quote in there that says she hides her true desires and intentions using charm and wit to deflect probing questions from Dryden Voss, right? So she's learned how to navigate and do a lot of these things. So she is hardened to some extent, but you're right. Like, she's probably done some really horrible things, but when it comes to Hahn, at least in this movie, she's got a huge soft spot. And then is she a bad person, or is she just trying to stay in the game?
I don't think she's a bad person right now. I think it's very much trying to stay in the game. I don't know. I mean, there's an argument for bad person. Maybe we just haven't seen it on screen yet, but
yeah,
I think this is still more of a survival type of thing, but we're starting to, do we have enough to say that she's got a lot of ambition? And I'm glad you brought up the quote from the official guide, because that certainly suggests that there's a lot more ambition than what we saw on screen. And we definitely, like we said, we saw her take control in that lieutenant role and actually hand on shoulder for Voss, calming down, rephrasing, taking control of the situation, even from him. So there is we're flirting with this line a little bit now of is she all in or not? And I don't know if she's all in or not, but man, all the signs are kind of pointing towards yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would agree. I think she's playing the long game, where she's just, it's like she said in the movie, it's not about winning. It's just about staying in the game as long as you can. I think that's really her mantra right now.
Yep.
All right. So you got next one?
Yeah. Joe Defet, maybe. So this is about editing and pacing of the film. So usually we have multiple story threads going on at the same time, but Solo more or less sticks to a single story or perspective. So it's not as epic in the end and a little one-dimensional. So wonders if this is why people are leaving with a meh feeling after viewing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's actually a very good point. And honestly, it's one that I hadn't even considered.
Right.
And this is after 3 viewings now. But yeah, I think he's right. I mean, it is kind of linear in that sense that we, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, there's a good case to be made for some movies that are linear. I know plenty of movies that I've enjoyed that are very linear, but it's not very Star Wars, right? Even in Rogue One, we at the very end, we've got a couple of different fronts that are going on. We had the Scarif Beach battle. We've got Jin, Cassian, and Krennic, fighting in the tower, and then we've got the space battle that was kind of going on above everybody.
Right.
And I think the closest that we got to kind of like this multi-layered front type movie or Star Wars as we know it was really in Act 2, and even then it wasn't exactly the same, but we had a couple different things that were going on.
Right.
But yeah, in Act 3 it was kind of linear, and I think that speaks to what we said in maybe not in our initial reaction show, but the last one, well, maybe both, but yeah, we talk about Act 2 as being and touting that as where it's strongest. And that's where we had the more dynamic scenes and the more kind of different plot elements that were kind of running in parallel to one another. And we didn't get that so much in the first and third act. So
yeah, and I've watched some of the interviews that Lawrence and John Kasdan have done, and they did not want this to be a complex story. They wanted it to be very reminiscent of the Westerns and reminiscent of some of these other movies that were a little bit more direct and more straightforward. And they didn't have all of these crazy lines to where you have to really, this sounds bad, but you have to really think too much about what's going on and what's happening here and there. And you're worrying about something else going on. They really wanted to keep you in the moment as to what you were seeing and just keep following that same story. And as I started thinking about that and reading the question, I was like, okay, what would they have done that would have had multiple things going on at the same time that wouldn't have watered it down or made it difficult to really see some of the things that we wanted to see or actually needed to see at the end of the day. And I kept coming back to, I think for this type of movie, if we want to call it a heist movie or something along those lines, this type of things works. I think I've drawn the comparison a little bit to like Ocean's 11. Ocean's 11 gets a little bit complex, especially towards the end, and you're trying to keep up and you're like, oh yeah, I've got to be told what happened basically at the end of the movie, because I wasn't able to really keep up with it. Or you can't figure it out on their own because they remove so many different parts. And now Star Wars has always been really good about not doing that element of it. But at the same time, keeping it moving forward, one straight shot, for me was okay for this type of movie. I think if we were to get a saga film that did something like this, I definitely agree with you. I don't think that would work as well.
Yeah, while you're talking there, I was listening, but I was also thinking about like, that last act, so at the very end, the last battle, right, when Enfys Nest was in hiding and it was all, you get the tension where they lift the mask up and it's the old lady and you're like, oh, wow, cool. Like, they could have had both of those battles going on simultaneously and it would have required more, plot elements, things happening to build the tension. But there was a great opportunity there to say, okay, we've got this battle that you don't know how it's going to end on the beach with Enfys Nest and Dryden Voss's guys. And at the same time, we're going to be cutting back and forth between what was going on in his suite, right? And we didn't get that. It was kind of like, we got it very briefly, like the whole Enfys Nest thing when we found out that it wasn't her, like she comes in, explodes on them, and the battle's over, and then we cut back over to, Solo and Dryden and Kira. So it was linear in that regard too. But if they could have meshed those together, I think it would have given us a little bit more of that dynamic that we're used to, I think, in Star Wars movies.
Yeah, I think it's part of the climax and the excitement at the end. Well, I think you had made this comparison in the reaction show. You had made this comment that Act 2 was really exciting and a lot of climactic elements. But when we got to the end, it just couldn't quite get all the way back there. And I think you're right. This is very much it. Even when they tried to split that story up, it settled down rather than amping up. And while there was some tension there, that tension never actually got kinetic on you, if you will. It didn't actually erupt or nothing happened with it to the extent that we're used to it happening to it in a Star Wars movie. Yeah. Right. So that's a really good point. And to tie back to your reaction show, I think that's definitely something that I could see at the end of the movie was a little bit lacking. That it ended well, but it could have ended a little bit better, maybe.
Yeah.
All right.
Last
question of the day from a longtime friend of the show, Becca.
Becca. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Am I missing one? Or is that it? I think this is it.
No, we still got a few more.
Oh, do we? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So
let's. Bread's next. I'll ask you the question.
Okay.
Here. If they do make another movie following Hahn, do you think that it almost necessarily involves Kira and Maul, or mostly Maul? He has that in parentheses. Being the main villain, or was that just fan service? I think it's contingent upon. So I'm going to bring up the Kenobi movie because I really think it's contingent upon Kenobi. So, well, two things. One, if Kenobi happens, and then two, where the Kenobi story goes, and to be direct, whether or not Maul is a part of it. Because if he becomes a central character in the Kenobi movie, then having him as a central point in like Solo 2 or worse, Solo 3, I think it's almost going to be too much. I think we're going to get choked out on Darth Maul, which is kind of crazy because if you think about it, we'll have him in The Phantom Menace, we'll have him in Clone Wars, we'll have him in Rebels, Solo 1, Solo 2, Solo 3, then Kenobi. I mean, it's just, you talk about like a 180 for a character that was in The Phantom Menace all of about 10 minutes of screen time. And now he's like pivotal in, a two television, not pivotal, but I guess you can make the argument, at least at given certain points, he's pivotal in two television series, and then, 2 movies, a minimum, probably 3 movies. It's a complete 180 for that character. So I don't know. I think it really just depends on, whether or not the Kenobi movie happens, and is he going to be kind of like that central focus? I think if he is a central focus of the Kenobi movie, then I think he just becomes the guy in the wings. He becomes the man behind the mask, or we just know that Kira and then whatever other baddies they introduce, we all know that there's a reporting structure and he sits at the top in that throne, but we don't necessarily need to see him in the actual movies themselves.
I agree with you. I get concerned that the Maul Kenobi relationship gets watered down too much. We have seen, and this is the challenging part about crossing media with some of these really recognizable characters too. You got the stories with Clone Wars and Rebels with Maul, and there's an arc and there's a completion to that. And now we're putting him in the middle. Yeah, I mean, factoring in the Kenobi movie, I'm still struggling to see how they even cross paths, because when we get to Rebels, it just seems like they have been completely disconnected since the last time they saw each other, which was in the Clone Wars.
So hold that thought, because there's another question here from GM 2187, and it's very similar. So I want to tie these together. So his question is, what is Maul's end game at this point? Is he still trying to get to Kenobi? Where are we at in the Maul timeline with his exile on Dathomir? So the answer to this is, I don't think so. Kenobi is not even his end game right now, right? Because based on what we know from Rebels, he's not even aware that Kenobi's alive. It's not until the Holocrons of Fate episode, when they're messing with the Holocrons, that they see the twin suns and all that, and then he's got that famous, he starts yelling, he lives, that kind of thing. Right. It was until that moment he has no idea that Kenobi's even alive. That's what starts him down this white whale kind of path with him and Kenobi, where he just becomes obsessed with it, and we kind of find him obviously all the way at the very end in the last season of Rebels, where he isn't run around the desert, just completely lost his mind. But up until that point, again, he didn't really know that this dude was even alive. I think in this timeline, he's just an honest guy trying to make a living, right? He had a touch of glory with the syndicate and all that, right? And he's probably just going back to what he knows, and that's.
But he got smacked around by Palpatine there at the end.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and he was allowed to live.
He was allowed to live, but they didn't pick him up until Rebels again, right?
Was
there anything in between?
Yeah, no, there's nothing. So it's the fall of no. So Sidious lets him live, but yeah, the fall of Malachor, at the end of the Clone Wars, literally right at the end of Clone Wars is when, and I'm saying Clone Wars, not the show, but the end of Clone Wars, the actual Clone Wars themselves, that's when he disappears, and we don't know what happened between that time span. I think it's like 9 years or something like that. We don't know what's going on, but then fast forward to Solo, he's back in power again. So what I'm saying is he had a brush of glory and fame with the crime lords and all that, got smacked around by Sidious. Sidious leaves him, and for whatever reason, and somehow he goes back to the only thing that he knows, because he's not, he doesn't identify with Sith anymore, and he's definitely doesn't want anything to do with that guy anymore, right? Yeah. So what does he do? He goes back to being a crime lord, and given that he was a Sith at one point, yeah, he's got a lot of influence, and he's got a way to kind of take that power literally, if and when he wants it.
Yeah, I was just curious because Palpatine had said that he had a purpose for him, and I just wasn't really sure what that was. I do want to get to the next part of GM 2187's question, though, is how did Maul get to Kira? So I'm assuming this means that how did he maybe interact with her and then also influence her? And
I don't know that he directly did. I mean, I think she was just brought in right into the inner circle by Dryden Voss. I think that's the connection. I don't think that he necessarily went and sought her out or anything. I think she's just there, and Maul's aware of her because Dryden Voss speaks of her fondly. This is my first lieutenant. I don't think he really cares so much. I think it's just Kira owes a lot to Dryden, and that's how she was kind of brought in.
Yeah, I kind of wonder if that was her first face-to-face with Maul. She probably knew who he was, but never actually interacted.
That's a good point. Yep.
Okay. All right. Next question is from Zinkel. Yeah, back on track here. Can the Falcon do the Kessel Run in 12-ish parsecs a second time? I'm going to go with no.
Well, I mean, because the run that we saw in that movie was all predicated on the injection of coaxium, I would say that right now, no. But going back to what we were talking earlier about with the special modifications, I think it's possible that he may have done something between this timeline and episode 4 that was maybe more permanent, that would allow him to do it again or get near close to it if he had to. Right. But yeah, I'd like to think that he could, at least at when we see him in episode 4, I'm going to take him at face value and say that he probably could if he had to. Well, I mean, he may have to pull it out, last minute and by the skin of his teeth as usual, right. But I think he could do it.
Yeah, maybe they wouldn't have the circumstances of a giant sea or space squid or whatever trying to attack you at the same time. It'd be a little easier to handle.
It's Abeloth.
It's Abeloth. Oh my goodness.
It really is. I'm 100% sure that it is.
You're serious?
No, Danda's got a question. Do you think Kira dies when she goes to Maul?
I'm going to guess no.
No. Yeah, that would be very Ryan Johnson of the Kazans to do that to her. Yeah, I don't think so. I think she lives.
Yep. She's now an instrument for Maul, so I think he'll see her as useful, at least for now.
Yeah.
Star-Lord, do you think the Kenobi movie will somehow connect to Solo? Will we see another Maul versus Kenobi battle?
All right, so this is, I think, going back, I think you had asked a question. Here's where I'm tying it in my head canon. So yes, I think it would be total fan service and cool if we did get another epic battle between the two. But I think it would take away from the Rebels showdown a little bit because if you look at the choreography and what we know from from what Dave Filoni said about that whole battle and what they did, it's very purposeful, right? There was sheer intent in the way they stood, their stances, the way they were kind of revving up for that last couple swings before he puts him down,
right?
And then they were playing mind games and that whole thing. So that's not to say that they couldn't retcon that somehow. So if they did do a Kenobi movie and Maul was in it, I mean, they could say, yeah, we could put those same types of moves in there, and so it still pays off when Rebels episode comes out. But I think the thread that runs between these two, if we had a look at Solo and Kenobi, is I think it's really just comes down to Crimson Dawn. The problem is, again, going back to the Holocrons of Fate episode, because they would have to retcon a reason for Maul to think that Kenobi was dead after the movie was over. Otherwise, that scene makes no sense, right? If you're going to bring Maul back in Kenobi, then this would take place before Rebels. So he would have to walk away from that, his presence in the Kenobi movie, as thinking that Kenobi was dead, which just seems like a lot of retconning they would have to do if that was the case.
Yeah, I think about the only way they'd be able to connect Kenobi to Solo would be through the Hutts, and it really be very, very disconnected and from a distance type of thing. And will we see another Maul versus Kenobi? I don't think we will, unless they're going to redo or show the Rebels conflict on screen, which I got to be honest, I'm a little bit torn about whether I want to see that. I think I would like to see it, but I really kind of liked what I saw with Rebels. So even though it was kind of fast, so I don't really know about that one. I'm going to go with no, though.
Yep. All right. And then finally, now we'll get to Becca's question. As she reads through Ray Carson's Most Wanted, Most Wanted, that's the novel that's out. I think it's a young adult novel. Kira appears to have a, quote, better them than me persona. Becca is beginning to doubt that Kira is as committed to Hahn as we saw at the beginning of Solo. She's stronger than Hahn at that point. Had he been caught, he would have been broken, while Kira survived and thrived. Do we have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I haven't read Most Wanted, and I'm working my way through Last Shot right now, just for full disclosure there. And that's a curious change of character for her, or different take on the character, because I think I think I can see that mentality, except with Hahn. I don't see that she's not committed to Hahn to where she would throw him under the bus and just say, well, better Hahn to take the bullet than me, because that just doesn't seem in her character. Even at this point in Solo, that doesn't seem to be the case. But had Hahn been captured instead of Kira, Han's a survivor too, so I don't know that Hahn would have been broken. Hahn didn't have to evolve because he had the freedom to have a singular focus, whereas Kira didn't have that luxury. I think Hahn, even though he flunked out of the Imperial, he was always looking for opportunities, and so I think he would have found opportunities. Now, would have gotten himself killed is a totally different conversation. But I think we saw that with the White Worms. He always had a scheme. He always had something up his sleeve. So I don't know that he would have been broken. I think he would have just done it differently.
Yeah. Good point. I haven't read Most Wanted, honestly, and I'm not sure that I will, but it's a long summer, and I may throw that into the mixer here later. But based on what we got in the movie and based on what we got from the official guide, I think she's way more mature. She's calculated. She's definitely self-preserving in a lot of different ways. And there's a quote actually in the official guide, and it says it's she. And I don't remember her saying this in the movie, but it's a really cool quote. She says, "It's what we learn on the streets, Hahn. Somebody falls, you keep running. It's how you stay alive." Right. And I think that's kind of hits the point home that Becca's trying to make here, is that she really is, we talked about earlier whether or not she was hardened and all that. And again, I think she is to some extent, but I think when we see Kira in Act 2, that's her mantra right there, is that if somebody falls, you just keep running. You don't turn around, you don't help them, you keep moving. You're self-preserving, you do what you need to do to stay alive, to stay in the game as long as you can. But like we said earlier, I think she has that soft spot for Hahn. And because he is the good guy, I think in that moment, when we see her in Act 2 and Act 3, if she's got it, because she has that soft spot, and I don't think she has that soft spot for anybody else at this point, right?
Right.
But for him, if she can still have self-preservation and keep herself alive, and at the same time help Hahn because she has that soft spot for him, I think she's going to do it. I think she's willing to risk it all, right? But I doubt she's ever I don't think she's ever risked doing that for anybody else in her life except for Hahn. I think he is the one exception. I think that piece right there is, if they go into a story 2 and a story 3, and we get this kind of a twisted plot or storyline where she becomes the antagonist in the movie, I think that pays off big time, because it really is going to drive again that wedge into Han's mind and who to trust and and all of that we see later.
Yeah, the only person that she's willing to make that sacrifice for is Hahn.
Yep.
And so that's I agree with you there. I think that's a good way of putting it.
That's it. We got through them all.
All right. Thank you guys for all your questions. You guys and ladies, don't mean to keep saying guys. We really appreciate all the questions. These were fantastically well thought out, and like I think I said last time, a bit of a challenge to try to condense them into something that we could kind of get across on air. But we appreciate all the thought into it. And man, I was blown away by how many questions we got. I think we got upwards of 16 or 17 or something like that. So certainly appreciate it and look forward to the next one. These are a lot of fun. I love these shows.
Yep. Well, that's going to do it for us. If you want to get a hold of us, you can find us on Instagram at the CantinaCast, on Twitter at the CantinaCast. We are on Facebook at /the CantinaCast. You can shoot us an email. Always love reading those. Send that to cantinacastfanmail@gmail.com. We are on iTunes, where you can leave reviews. We've got a Discord. We've got the Patreon, the TeePublic, and then we'll throw that link in there at the bottom of the show notes as well for the Keep CantinaCast weird event that we've got later this month. So, Jonesy, any other final thoughts before we close it out?
Thank you. We love you guys.
Yeah, guys, thanks so much. We'll be back in about a week. We'll be talking about Hahn, Lando, and we'll get to talk about L337. So thanks again for joining, and we will see you all next week.
You're still listening? Wow. That's amazing. Well, I'm here to give you the disclaimer. Normally we do a big, long, drawn-out disclaimer thing saying what's what and who's what and all that other stuff, but I think you guys kind of know that Lucasfilm and Disney have no affiliation with us at all, and we have none with them. We talk about Star Wars, which is their property, and all that other good, fun stuff, but I think you can tell which is our stuff and which is their stuff. If you can't, well, then send a lawyer to send an email to me, and I'll be glad to chat with them. Other than that, you know what's what, so that's your disclaimer.